Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into crucial component of our e-commerce microservice architecture, and that is implementing JWT authentication, that is JSON Web Token authentication. This will be the key to securing our APIs and managing user sessions effectively. I will walk you through the setup of our authentication API using JWT, ensuring our microservices remain protected while allowing seamless access for authorized users. Let's get started and lock down our APIs with secure, reliable authentication. So when we go through our diagram again, you can see that we have about 4 APIs in here. Gateway is 1, we have authentication is 2, we have other and product. Now all of these are inheriting, or they are going to use this authentication API. So we need to create it in such a way that before a user can have access to this API in here, this user must be authenticated by this API, and that is what you're going to do. And the type that you're going to use here, it is JWT. All right, so let's get started. We've made 3 videos before this, so if you haven't checked any of the videos, kindly check the video description. I have the videos link in there. You can watch them. All right, so let me close this, and we're going to create a new solution, and you're going to create project using the clean architecture by having our domain, our infrastructure, our application, and our presentation layers. So let's launch a Visual Studio 2022 or higher. And now we're going to create a blank solution. So choose blank solution, and let's give it a name. As a name, that's what we have been using for this project. That is demo e-commerce. Then dot, now this is going to be authentication API solution. So that is the namespace, and let's choose location for that, and click on create to create. So once you're going to add the clean architecture for the authentication project. Add new project, and this is going to be class library. So we're saying authentication API dot domain. So let's add this. After this, we need to add the layers. Let's go and add the next one. And now this is application. Let's add infrastructure. Let's add presentation. And this, we choose Web API. So let's clean the default class created within each project. We're going to delete weather forecast. Let's remove the controller. Let's rebuild this project. Now the building is done. Let's go to the infrastructure and let's install these packages. So we need bcrypt.net. This is a package that we need to encrypt user password. This will be used for encryption and verification. So install that. and let's install EF call to the presentation layer. So we need Microsoft.entityFrameworkCall.tools. Make sure you install this package. These are the packages that we will need. Now let's go ahead and add our shared library project. And that is our eCommerce.shared library. So let's add this project. Let's add project references. So we need to add this library to the application and the infrastructure and also the presentation. So let's add this to the application. So under Dependencies, right click, add project reference, select the library. Okay. Now go to the infrastructure and now let's add the application. And let's go to the presentation and add the infrastructure. Right click on this. Let's rebuild it again. So succeeded. Let's clear all this and let's go and create our DB set. So close all. Now go to solution and under domain, let's add folder. Let's name this as entities. Let's go ahead and add a model. And I'm going to call this as app user. So we are not implementing the identity manager. We want to have something simple for this project. So we are creating a simple custom authentication as JWT. Now let's have this ID as integer. Aside from that, we need the name of the user. We also need the telephone number. We need address. We need email. We need password. Then we need role. Then maybe date. Now let's set this to datetime dot now. That is what we need for our model. We need to go ahead and create our DTO. So that is all that we need to do in the domain. Let's go to our application. Now in here, let's add folder as DTOs. Do you remember that when we were creating the other API, we created a DTO for app user? Do you remember that? Yes, so go there and now copy that. Because that's what I'm going to use here. I'm not going to type everything again. So this app user DTO. And this, you're going to make it as a record. We need name, telephone, address, email, password, and a row. Date will be set automatically. So there is no need for us to provide it. Let's save this. In order for user to log in, for GWT token to be generated, we need to provide a login DTO. So let's go ahead and add a class, login DTO. This is going to be a record as well. Now with this, we want to have email, and password. The next thing that we are going to do is to create our interface, whereby this interface is going to have 3 interfaces. So let's add a folder to the application. Let's name it as interfaces or contracts. Within that, let's create an interface, and I'm going to name mine as iUser. You can also change yours. Now this should be public, and I believe you know this. Let's have a look in here with our 3 interfaces that we need to create. They all come as a result of task. Then we're going to have the response created in our shell library. And the first method here is register, as you know. Then we need to pass in our app user DTO. Then let's have the object out of it. We need to also have another one, which is coming as a response. And now with this is login. Now we're going to set a token to the message property. So don't worry. Then we're going to have login DTO. And in that, we're going to say login. Then last one, we want to have get user. This get user should return app user DTO, and that is get user, whereby we specify user ID. We need these 3 interfaces. Well, you can create more, okay, but for now, that is what we need for our system to work. This should come from shared library, not Azure. So now that we have this, what is the next thing that we need to do? We have our interface created, and what do you think will be the next step? We go straight to our infrastructure. We're going to create a folder known as repositories, and in there, we're going to implement the interface that we have created in here. So quickly, let me close this layer, open the infrastructure layer. Let's add folder to that. Now within this folder, we're going to add a class which is going to inherit this interface. So I'll say this is user repository. Now this user repository is going to inherit our user interface. Let's implement the 3 interfaces that we have. Before we can work with this, we need to have our DB context. So let's create authentication DB context. Let's create a folder in there first. So folder in the infrastructure. Name it as data or whatever. Then let's add a class. This is authentication DB context. Now this authentication DB context, this should inherit from DB context. We need to create constructor for this, and then specify the DB context. where we can use primary constructor to handle that on a single line. Let's make this as public. Aside from that, let's create a DB set. That's going to be a table in a database. And this is DB set. Let's specify our model as app user. Then we say that we want the table name to be users. Let's remove unnecessary using. Save this. Go to the user repository. And here, let's inject it, the interface. iUser, and I will say this is user interface. Now, in order for us to get the user, what must we do? I believe you have a fair idea on that, isn't it? You can pause the video and try to implement it, and let's see. Since we'll be generating our JWT, we have to inject our I configuration, and I believe you haven't forgotten that. So when it comes to get user, we can have this user equal await. Then we have a context. So here, I think there's a mistake. This should be authentication, DB context. And I believe you've done that, isn't it? So authentication, DB context. And we say this is context. Great. Now in here, we are saying that context.users, that we can have a look with first or default async, whereby this user marks to user dot. What are we looking up for? Email. So let's use email. And here you want to check it is equal to. Alright, so here we are passing in user ID, not user email. But this should be email, not an ID. So maybe we have to go into our interface, and instead of the user ID, we should change it to user email. Or maybe, I'm sure we're going to make a call to that. So let's maintain it. Let's finish the code before. Alright, so here we're saying that this user ID and this get user here, it is not what we're going to implement. We're going to be getting data from the user. So maybe we can extract that method as a public or private. So maybe let's make it as private, because we're going to be calling this multiple times. So it's better that we have a separate class to handle that. Let's have this as a private. This async is a task, and this will return app user. And we say this gets user by email. Let's specify the email in there. And in here, we're going to say user is equal to. Then we're going to have context. Let's have an await first. So context dot user dot first or default, whereby this user dot email is equal to this email coming in. We want to return user is null. So return if user is null, then we want to return null, else we want to return user. This will come in the form of app user. That is a DB set. Maybe we can make this nullable. Okay, so when it comes to get user, what are we going to do? Let's say this user here is equal to this. let's find ID, because since we have an ID here, we can use find async. Now within that, let's specify the user ID. And with this, as soon as we get it, you want to return new. Before we return, we have to check it. So we are saying that if user is not null, that is where we want to do this. Okay, but we can use ternary operator to handle this simple. So let's have return user is not null question mark, then you want to return new app user DTO, and in that we need the user ID. So let's specify user ID. So user.id. Then we need telephone. So user.telephone. The next thing is we need, okay, so the name first before telephone. So user.name. Then we have our telephone. And the next one, we have address. So user.address. Next, we have email. That is user.email. Next, we have password. And we're not going to return password. Okay, so you want to return row, and that is user.row. So you want to return this. Now, in case user is null, then return null. When we check this, we are saying that we did not specify. Let's check the user DTO. We have row, address. All right, so from this password app user DTO, so meaning there's an issue here. Now, if you're going to get user, we don't want to include a password, right? But when adding user, you want the user to add password. So it tells us that we need to create two entities or two DTOs for that. One is get user DTO, and that is one is create user DTO. So once you have this app user DTO, let's go and create one DTO attached to this. Let's go to application, and in that, let's add class of this, and here this is get user DTO. Now this get user DTO, let's go to this app user DTO. Let's grab this. Let's go to get user DTO. Let's paste this here. Let's make sure we swap the class, the name. Now there's a record. So here, let's make sure we include the using statement, and let's remove all unnecessary namespace or this links. That is a using statement added. Now we want to remove the row. Note that is a password, because we don't need password. And let's grab this. Let's go to the interface. And now where you have this get, you want to return get user DTO. When we go to the implementation here, we are returning this. You want to get this. Okay. And here what it is saying, we need to make sure we check for now. Let's check for now with this. And that is it. So this is going to get at the user as soon as you provide user ID. Okay. Now let's have a look with the create and the login. Let's first work with the create first, and that's the register. So here we have a register. Now with this register, we're going to check first, get the user. So it's equal to await get user by email. We need to specify the email. So that's appdto.email. Now we can check. So if this is null, then we want to return new response. And now this is going to be false. And saying user already exists. Well, or you cannot use this email. Whatever, you can add a lot here. You cannot use this email, maybe for registration. That is what I'm adding, but where you can customize this. Okay. But in case the user is not found, it means this is a new user. And we're gonna have result equal to context.user. So let's have context.user.add. And now here let's have new app user. We need to convert this into, we don't need to provide ID to be given automatically. And now this is app user.name. We have email, and that is app user.email. We have password, and now with password we're going to say that bcrypt. So bcrypt.next.bcrypt.hashpassword. Now let's provide a password, which is app user.password. And the next thing, we need to provide telephone number. We said this is equal to app user.telephone number. We need to provide address, and we do so. Do you have any left? You have row. Let's write row as well, and that's the app user.row. Okay. As soon as you are done with this, we can go ahead and now perform context, save changes async. And as soon as we save changes, we want to return a success response to user. So let's say return, then we're gonna have result.entity, then .id. If it is greater than 0, it means yeah, it worked. If you set this to true, the user has registered. So let's have user registered, maybe successfully. Then or return new same response, that will be false. And now just name it invalid, data provided, or error occurred. You can add any. Okay. And that is all we need to do under registration of user. Let's go to the login. So login is over here. If the user wants to log in, what is the first thing? You want to get the user detail first. So equal to await. So you call get user. Now this get user, let's provide by email. Provide the email in there. We're going to say that if user is, so if user is null, then we want to return new response. Now this new response, that should be false, and I believe you are aware of that. And we're going to say this is invalid user or credentials. But in case user is found, let's confirm the password verification. So we say verify password, which will return here, and we say bcrypt. So bcrypt.next.bcrypt, then verify. Now that we need to provide the raw password, and that is coming from login DTO.password. And now the hash password is coming from get user.password. So if this is true, then we can go ahead. So we say if verify password here it is false, then what are we going to do? We want to return new response. And on this response here, you want to say this flag is false. and invalid, you want to so have a look at it, invalid credentials. Let's close this. But in case the password matches what we have in database, then we're going to create our token, and we're going to have a method known as generate token. Now this generate token, let's pass in this model, that is get user. And at the long run, let's return new response. Let's pass in true. And now from the message, we pass in this token. Let's go ahead and I'll generate this method. So down here, let's have a private, which could be static, is to return string, and now the name is generate token. It's coming in with app user, so we say this is user. Now with this method, let's have a key extracted, and we can extract a key using this encoding by etf8.getByte. So let's encrypt this get byte, and in that we can have config.getSection, and this section, what's the name of this section? That is authentication. Do you remember? Then in there you want to grab the key, then you want to extract the value, check for null, and that is what you want to get. So let's also have security key. Now this key that we have in here is equal to new symmetric security. I got a security key, not the algorithm, is over here. Then let's pass in the key that we have created or retrieved. Now the next thing that we're going to do is quite simple. We need to create our credentials. Now with credentials, we have a look at it as new signing key. So we have sign credentials, pass in the security key, and also let's specify the algorithm to use. And we want to use HMAC256. Let's create our claims. Now these claims, we're going to have it in a new list. This list of claim type. And now with this claim type, we need to include system.security.claims. So let's use that. Then in here, let's have two claims. So we have a new, and that is claim types dot name. Let's give it value. So user dot name. Let's check for now. The next one, let's add the email. So here we can say that claim type dot email, and that is user dot email. Let's add row. Now claim type dot row. Then we are saying that it is user dot row. So we have three claims specified, and that is great. I believe you've done. Now in here we want to check before we add row. You say this is the entry point, the registration entry point for all clients who want to create an account. And now in here we can specify to add a row to user or not. If an administrator decides not to add row to the user, defaultly the row which is going to be assigned to the user will be the default row, and it means the user is just authenticated with no row. And the user can also decide to assign row to that user. So for now, we want to create a system to be used by administrator and users. So users, they are just authenticated users with no row, and we have admins who are authenticated with row. So in order for us to do this, this is what we need to do. I'm going to remove one of these, and here I'm going to say that if string, so if string dot is null or empty, that is user.row. So if the user creating this account decide not to specify row, then it means you're going to have a default row for this person, right? But in case it isn't, that is where we want to add that. So we are saying that if string is not equal to this, and let's also check, or if string, let's say we use this equals, then with this equal, we want to specify that is string, that is the default, and also user.row. Let's use string comparison dot ordinal ignore case. So you want to check if they are equal or if they are not equal. That is why you want to do that, because this returns bool, so we can negate it. In case they are not equal, that is only when you want to have claims dot add. Then let's add this new user. Okay, so we want to compare the two. If they are not equal, then we add it. It means the row has been specified. Now let's see what is happening here. So it takes in 3 arguments. So this is giving us issue because it takes in 2. And now with this, we can just check with our own. Maybe let's remove this. Yes, so we have that. Then we're going to add a new row to the token that we're going to create. All right, so now that we have this set, let's go ahead and create our token. So we're going to say our token here is equal to new security token. And in that, we need to specify some properties in here, such as the issuer. So the issuer, we need to get it from config. And within config, we can extract an authentication section. Then we can get authentication. Then we can get the issuer in there. Aside from that, we can have audience, and we can do same. So let's go ahead and grab what we have. And instead of issuer, we do what? Audience. Okay. Now the next one that you're going to get here is, so this shouldn't be, we have this, our config authentication audience. Now the next one that you're going to have here is quite simple. We're going to have the claims. So these are claims. And now with these claims, we have the claim set already, so you provide it. The next thing, we have an expired. No expires, we are not providing it. So we can set this to null. We have assigned credentials, we have it also created as credentials. So we then provide that. That is what we need to make this work. Now the next thing to do here is we need to return new JWT token. So JWT token, and now with this, we need the token handler dot, we can have a method known as write token. This should be a method. So, and in that we can have write token out of it, and then we provide the setup that we have made. And that is all. It's going to give us the token. All right, so now we're going to have a token with an issuer, audience as scheme. About the algorithm, you're going to have the issuer, the audience, a claims, whereby the claims has 3 claims: email, name, and a row, in case the person specified the row. All right, so now we have this ready. The next thing to do here is quite simple as well, and I believe you've done this. We're going to create dependency injection, and I'll register everything in here nicely. So let's go to our solution, the same infrastructure project. Click on add new folder. Let's name this as dependency injection. Then in that, we need to create a class known as service container, as always. Now this service container, this must be a public static class. Then we're gonna have our public. There's gonna be a static, and we're going to return iService collection, and we say this add infrastructure service, and it needs this iService collection. So iService collection, then we say this is service. Then aside from that, we also need iConfiguration. Then we also going to say this is config. And in that, let's return services. Let's add database connectivity. And let's also add authentication scheme. And it is no authentication scheme than JWT. Okay, so we have our shared they have shared container, service container dot add shared service, which takes in authentication, DB context, and in that you need to specify services. We need config, and also we need a config in here as my Serilog provide file name. Let's check for now. Now let's terminate that. Okay. Now the next thing to do here is let's create dependency injection, and in that we need to add services dot add scope by user and user repository. Okay. Now in our application builder class, we need to specify the middleware. So this should be public, this should be static, and that is an application builder. And we say this use infrastructure policy, use infrastructure policy, takes in this application builder, we say app. Then in here you need to register middleware such as what? I believe you know this. Global exception. So this global exception is going to handle external errors. Then aside from that, we need to implement our listen only to API gateway, and this will also block all outsiders call. And in that we are saying it is shared container.use policies, and that is all. At the end, we need to return app. Okay, so that is what we need to do. And now here let's specify the app as parameter. Alright, so the next thing to do here after we are done is to create our presentation. So open your presentation project. Now in there, let's go to the app settings. And now in the app settings, authentication is going to run on the port of, that is the properties line settings instead. Now this should run a port of 5000, so we can remove the HTTPS. Then this is running on 5000. Okay, the next thing to do here is we need to go out there and make a copy of the app settings file that we created. So let's go to the previous project, and in that we go into the presentation, and in the app settings we make sure we grab what we created in there. We go to the app settings, line settings, we have one left. That is this, and that is this. So we have in profile, to profile, that is all. Okay. Now let's check our app settings. And in here, we have a connection string already. And file name, it is not authenticate, not product. It is rather authentication. Then we have the same thing here because it is running on port 5000, and that's what we need to specify here. Let's go to the program.cs file and I include the service that we created. So let's remove all this. And now here we are saying that builder.services.add infrastructure. Before we can get this, we have to include using, and here we need the authentication API dot infrastructure the dependency injection, and we can have access to add infrastructure service. Within this, we need to include builder.configuration. When we come to this, we need to also add the policies. So we say this is app.use infrastructure policy. Then we save that. Let's go and create our controller for this. So I click on this. Let's go to add controller. Then we're going to add API empty. And here we're going to say this controller name will be authentication. And now with this, we need to inject our interface. So user, and I will say this is user interface. We have 3 methods that we're going to implement. So what are going to be the first one? We can have access to register, which is HTTP post. HTTP post. And with this post, we can specify public async, and that will be task, which return an action result of response. So control period. Then we're gonna say this is register, which is in app user DTO, and that is app user. So we're going to check if module state is not null. We've done it already, so I'll just go and grab that. But in case it is null, in case it isn't, Then you want to have a look at this with the user interface. Then .register, passing this app user DTO. We can return result.success or .flag, that is success, question mark, if true then return OK with the result, else bad request with the same result. So that is going to be our register. Let's have a look with the login too. It's the same HTTP post, but with this, let's have login, and here let's have register. Now let's also check if module state is null. So we can just grab what you have in here, even everything, and let's paste it here. All that you need to do is to change this to login, which takes in login DTO. And I'll say this is login DTO. Copy this, let's change in here, and that is login method. And that is all. Now to get user by ID, this should be HTTP get. Then with this get, we need to specify an ID, which is integer. And we have our public async task as an action result. And this should return get user DTO. Do you remember? And that is get user passing the ID. So we can check that if ID is less than or equal to 0, then return response. So this is returning, okay, so here should be bad request, so return bad request, and we can say that is invalid user ID. Else, what I'm going to do, we're going to call this method, so user interface that gets user. And at the long run, we want to return this instead of bad request to be not found. And that is a user. Okay, so here we're going to get user. That is going to be the user because get the user by ID. So you can say if user is flagged because user is not there. So user.id is greater than 0. Okay, so let's build this project together. Alright, so you can see that the projects have been built. Now let's go ahead and run. But before that, we need to add migration. So make sure you set your presentation as tab, package manager console, infrastructure, and now add migration. First, let's give it location to put this, and now let's wait so the file will be generated. And that is done. This is our file. So let's go ahead and update it. Alright, so you can see that migration has taken place. And now we can go ahead and test our project. So right click, set presentation as project, startup. Let's run this and check it out. It should run on a port of 5000. So you can see that our API is ready. Let's go ahead and quickly create an account. Let's maintain the defaults, and I'm going to set this to Netcode-Hub and maybe an email. That's going to be user at. Okay, so we have this. Now the row, I'm going to set this to admin. So click on execute. Now let's wait and check it out. So there's an issue here we need to check, and I believe you've seen that, isn't it? Well done. You see, from here we are returning bad requests of this, but here instead of returning bad requests with this result, we are not doing that. You are returning this request, and that is bad. And aside from that, when we check, this should be results again, and this should also be result. So this is going to be the user, isn't it? So not found, you shouldn't return anything. Okay. I think the issues are solved now. Now let's check our user repo. So from here, we're checking if you want to register. So if user is not now, so here should be now. We should not negate it. And now I believe everything is set. You shouldn't get any error when we try to run this endpoint. Now let's go ahead and register. This will be ID of 1. Then let's change the email to maybe admin@admin.com. I want to maintain this, and now let's set this row to admin. Now click on register. And now let's see. So we have an issue here. That's an email field is not valid. So admin at, oh, okay. There's the email. Now let me change this address to Ghana. Now let's click on execute again. And this should get the account created. Alright, so yes, so we have it. Now let's go and log in. So we can log in this. And here we are using this email. So we're going to get a token. So let's check this out. Oh yeah, so we have it. Now let's grab this token and go to dwt.io. Now in here, let's paste this token and see the composition. We see we have the name is Netcode-Hub. There is an email address. We have a row of admin. There's an issuer, and then there's the audience. And you can see from here we have the signature. That's a HMark 256. That's what we use. The algorithm here is what we have, the 256. The type is DWT. Good. Now that is working. Now I have the other APIs opened. Let's run them again. So this is the product API solution. So in here, package manager console, and let's run this project. So .NET run. And let's also make sure we have the other one. Okay, so this we need to have let's navigate to the project and cd project. Maybe okay, so ls, let's grab this, and in here we have cd ls to view, and here this project is a product API, so we're going to copy this, then we say cd, then in here you can see we have the source here. We want to run the presentation, so grab this and say cd, and ls will give you everything. Then we can have .NET run. So while this is building, let's make sure we have the other API too available. All right, so we have the applications running. That is our authentication API. That is our product API. That is other API. Now let's make sure we have all these APIs can communicate. We go to the other detailed, and now here we're going to provide an ID of 1 because we have an ID of 1 which is linked to product ID. Now let's try this. Provide the other ID of 1. Let's execute this. So this is still running, and I think I know the issue. Now you can see that when we check our service, that is an other API service. We created our service container, and in that we set a default API or base address. This base address is, let's say, so we go to the solution, then we check our presentation and the app settings, and at the base address, what we have here, it is 5001. That is our product API. And we are not having our authentication API because we haven't created the gateway yet. So we have to explicitly specify that in there. So let's go to the other service. And in here, we need to use this instead of. So HTTP, localhost of API authentication. Then we now need to specify the ID like that. Now, when we create our gateway, we're going to edit this and I'll create it. Okay, but for now, let's maintain this. Let's rerun this and check it out. So let's get the other detail now and check it out. So passing the other detail of 1. All right, and that is it. So you see that we are having the product detailed, other detailed, product detailed, and now user detailed. So this, we are having this record from 3 APIs, and that is it. All right, so we have now created authentication, our product, and our other detailed. We have 1 API left, and that is the gateway API. So in the next video, we're going to talk about creating the gateway API, and I'm going to have a last video, that is, we're going to talk about creating unit tests for this project. Thank you for watching this, and I believe you've gotten or you've learned something new in this, isn't it? If so, then do not forget to click on the thumbs up icon, and also if you haven't subscribed, then you do so. All right, until then, happy coding and take care.